This is Sarah Jones on the Politicus Pod for Politicus USA's The Daily. Make sure you subscribe to our Substack so you don't miss any episodes. Today we're talking about moral depravity. The U.S. is not having a debate about gun rights. We are under assault by lawmakers and judges, voluntarily ignoring the right to life while they enable the slaughter of children. This is a really tough topic, but it's come to a point where we have to get into the rot, the decay at the center of our system, which we are seeing played out in front of us. So I hope you can hang in there with me, even though this is a tough subject. At every turn, we have seen the conservative movement putting women and children in their crosshairs, enabling mass shootings in schools and domestic violence attackers to be armed with guns at the same time as they are inciting their supporters to threaten violence against people with whom they disagree. It's gotten so bad that it's now identifiable as a voluntary violation of morals. Moral depravity is defined as a state of voluntary violation of morals, values, customs, or manners leading to an aberrant style of personality commonly associated with antisocial psychopathy. It's also known as the dark rot corrupting the U.S. government from within. The right to life surely outweighs the right to bear arms, a Sky News reporter pushed a fleeing Tennessee Republican representative. There was nothing but silence in response. Nothing, just, this is not the conversation they want to have. So I think it took a Sky News reporter, by the way, to ask that question, but it is the question. It is the question on every issue that is being pushed to the front of this, quote, culture war. The right to life surely outweighs the right to bear arms. No, it does not, in effect. That's not what we're seeing. It should, but it does not. Nashville Republican Representative Andy Ogles, whose district, thanks to Tennessee Republicans redrawing the district lines last year to gerrymander this red state even further, includes Covenant, the Christian school in which there was a horrific mass shooting just 2 days ago on Monday, March the 27th. Ogles ran away when confronted by a Sky News reporter with the notion that, quote, the right to life surely outweighs the right to bear arms. And there was a pause. He was being ignored, and he yelled, does the right to life outweigh the right to bear arms? No answer. This confrontation on Tuesday occurred during questioning about Ogles' obscene family Christmas photo, which included his children and wife posed around a tree holding what looked to be assault weapons under the caption, "Merry Christmas, the Ogle family," adding in quotes, "The very atmosphere of firearms anywhere and everywhere restrains evil interference. They deserve a place of honor with all that's good." They being guns. This is what's being elevated constantly. An inanimate object is being elevated into a place of honor. The Sky News reporter, do you regret your family gun photo? Why did you take it down from your Facebook feed now? This photo has been up there since, I believe, 2021, and through many mass shootings. He didn't want to talk about it, but he said he doesn't regret it. So I think it's fair to say that's moral depravity. This man, Congressman Andy Ogles, took nearly $25,000. He claimed in a GoFundMe was meant for a child burial garden. And he won't say what he did with it. He used the photo of a stillborn child to grift money, promising a place for burial of babies with benches for families, a life-sized statue of Jesus. It never happened, and he won't say where the money went. A contagion has spread among Republican lawmakers like Speaker McCarthy and Andy Ogles on Tuesday when they ran away from the press, loath to answer questions about their anti-safety, gun-fetishizing stances after the mass shooting in Nashville took the lives of 6 people, including 3 children. The 28-year-old school shooter illegally bought the 7 firearms that were hidden at their home, even though that shooter, Audrey Hale, was under care for an emotional disorder, according to Metro Nashville Police Chief. Yeah, Kevin McCarthy ran away as well. He refused to answer questions about the Nashville shooting, and when reporters tried to ask him anything about guns, he ran away. He was asked at least 2 questions about the Nashville shooting, including should there be any gun restrictions at all. He responded by not even looking at the reporters and walking away. As Jason Easley put it on Politicus USA, Republicans like McCarthy appear to lack the courage to state their beliefs that sacrificing the lives of young children is acceptable in defense of an unlimited Second Amendment. So, moral depravity is the theme. And I really hate that this is so partisan, because I feel like on the surface, people who don't pay attention to politics will see that and think that this is just 2 sides bickering about, some random issue. That's not what this is. This impacts every single person in this country, and we all need to pay attention to it. This is very important. It is unfortunate that it is so partisan, that it has become so partisan, that Republicans, by and large, have been so co-opted by the NRA that we cannot get them to take action even when children's lives are at stake every day when they go to school. We have devolved into this state of moral depravity, and it's due to this dark money corruption that runs the U.S. government in so many ways. And that's not to say there aren't good people in government, and there are many good things that are actually happening in our government. I don't want to depress people by speaking the truth to the point where they lose all hope. Hope is really important, and there are a lot of reasons to have hope, and there are people doing good work in our government. But through a lot of bad actors, we have a lot of things working against those good people. Citizens United, a lack of campaign finance laws, dark money. This is really what's happening, and that has attracted lawmakers who have no moral center. People like the leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, let's say, or George Santos, or Andy Ogles, a party led by someone who bragged he could shoot someone and not lose voters, does not attract the best people. The only thing that keeps some of the lawmakers on the Democratic side in order is the fact that they are held accountable by their base on a better field. Let's say they are the leaders at the top of the Democratic Party hold people accountable in the party. Maybe they do it because it looks good. That's kind of the point, though, isn't it? We want people who want to look good to us. We don't want people who have abandoned shame, which is what has happened under Donald Trump, to the Republican Party. Although he is not solely responsible, they were on that trajectory long before he came along. And we saw that in Sarah Palin. But these lawmakers are why children are being murdered in their classrooms. They vote against abortion, putting women and children's lives and health at risk, but then enable the mass slaughter of actual children. No lawmaker who votes against gun control should be allowed to argue against abortion without pushback from a free press. But that is in fact what we have happening here in the United States. This is an absurd and obscene position, given that the leading cause of death for children in the United States is guns, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. That means that guns have more rights than children do, largely because of the party that calls themselves pro-life. And under that banner, they get away with all kinds of legislation that is harmful to life. The Bill of Rights in the Constitution states in the 14th Amendment, it's a wonder we don't hear about many amendments, except really the second. We hear about that all the time. And the first, when it's being undermined, it seems. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens in the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. You know, it's clear that guns pose a threat to life, yet an inanimate object has more rights than human beings, including children. What kind of movement shields itself under the cover of concern for fetuses while actively ensuring that dangerous people who have threatened women and children are allowed access to as many weapons as they please? This is the same movement that works in the dark, has corrupted our judicial system, and is judge shopping to overturn rulings they don't like, and has seemingly bought off so-called representatives in Congress. I would like to point out that the violence that we're seeing isn't an accident. Not only are these school shootings preventable, as every other country demonstrates, but the violence that Trump is inciting is not an accident. If it were an accident, he wouldn't continue to say the things that he says. He wouldn't have held a rally in Waco, and Republican leaders would have denounced his calls to violence. We have already seen, and I'm really tired of the media not including this context, we have already seen the results multiple times of Trump's rhetoric. I live near Pittsburgh, and here in Pittsburgh we have the Tree of Life synagogue shooting that was inspired by rhetoric of Donald Trump's claims about a caravan, lies about a caravan, incentivized that shooter. There are so many instances that it's, innumerable at this point. But then if people are confused, there's the attack, the domestic terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol. These things, putting this in context, isn't meant to be some kind of denouncement of this random Republican. It is a denouncement of the leader of the Republican Party who is not being held accountable by people in his own party. If he were being held accountable, he would not be the forerunner for the 2024 election. So on Tuesday, a knife-wielding Trump supporter threatened a woman and her children outside of the Manhattan Criminal Court. Trump took his authoritarian circus show to Waco, but claimed he wasn't signaling what a trip to Waco symbolizes. Many people in the media bought that. That was just a random choice. Meanwhile, his followers got the messages he sent, either from his social media postings or his rally rantings, or maybe both. But this Trump supporter was arrested on Tuesday for threatening a mother and children with a knife outside of the Manhattan criminal courthouse, which had begun preparing over a week ago for a possible indictment against the man known for inciting violence. Angela Rucker was holding a yellow sign with black lettering that said, "I'm with Trump, are you?" when she got embroiled in an argument with two women, one with two small kids and the other a child in a stroller. As the verbal dispute flared up, Rucker whipped out a knife from her hip pocket and started waving it at the woman in a threatening way. This is from the New York Daily News. Then a letter we know was sent from Florida to the Manhattan DA containing white powder that turned out to not be threatening, thank goodness. But the letter threatened to kill the DA. Just a little, I guess that sightseeing, perhaps, a sightseeing letter. This gaslighting, that we're getting about the January 6th attack is another way, and Trump's rally reinforced this. It's another way that they've elevated violence. They've got their little, justice song, their J6 justice song. I think one of the most alarming and creepiest things I've ever heard. It was very reminiscent, unfortunately, of, I'm not calling Trump Hitler. Please, everyone know that. But I think it's very important to distinguish that it does matter. He has not opened camps to commit genocide, and that is a huge distinction. But I do think that it's also important to discuss the kinds of methods that Hitler used in his ascent to power, which he got democratically. So those signals, the ways that he accomplished that, really worked by manipulating people. And that's what Trump's doing. And it's the same kind of show. It had Trump, descending from the sky, from in his airplane. Everything was meant to show that these are patriotic martyrs, these people who attacked our country. So that's elevating terrorists, elevating to a position of martyrdom, to a position to be worshipped. And we've been seeing that growing among the Republican Party leaders, but his rally really reinforced that. So again, this is partisan, but it shouldn't be, right? Morality did not used to be a partisan issue. Actually, that's kind of interesting because morality was a partisan issue. It used to be for so long. It has been that liberals were kind of the dirty hippies, right? They were considered anti-moral, really. Republicans successfully painted the Democratic Party that way during the Vietnam War and for everything that followed. All of the culture wars, I don't like that term. That's the political term for it, and I don't really like it because I feel like it diminishes what was really going on. They're not culture war issues like the gay rights issues, the trans rights issues, the women's rights issues, the rights of black people to not be shot by the police. These are not culture wars. These are people's lives at stake. These are real human rights issues. They're not a culture war. So I use that term because it's what is identifiable for what's going on, but I don't agree with it. That's a conundrum, isn't it? So in the summer of 2022, so let's just get into a little bit of how, this this shouldn't be partisan, but it is. In the summer of 2022, after the mass shootings at Uvalde, Texas elementary school and a Buffalo, New York supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood, 34 Republican senators voted against a bipartisan gun safety bill, which was itself brought by Republican senators John Cornyn and Tom Tillis, and Democratic senators Chris Murphy and Kristen Sinema, who is no longer a Democrat. If some of those names have you side-eyeing this bill, you wouldn't be wrong. But in this country, we take the crumbs that we can get when it comes to the right to life for people who have already been born. 14 House Republicans finally got on board with Democrats to pass the first major federal gun safety legislation in decades, which did not ban any weapons and was a country mile short of what Americans wanted in polls and indeed what President Biden and the Democrats pushed for. So this is where we come to, yes, unfortunately, there is a partisan separation here. The top House Republicans whipped members against this bill. They deliberately tried to obstruct a bill that includes millions for school safety, mental health, and I'd like to point out those are the issues they point to every time there's a school shooting. Yet they didn't want to vote yes, and they didn't vote yes on this bill that addressed those issues they inaccurately claim are behind these school shootings. Those are all issues. Those are true. We do have issues. Oh my goodness, if they want to help us with mental health issues, great. We are desperately in need of that in this country. But that's not what's causing mass shootings. Every country has people have challenges with mental health. They do not have the mass shootings we have because they do not have the gun access that we have here. That's the end of that. It's just an absolutely grotesque gaslighting. So this bill included money for those issues. They were added because they address what the NRA-funded lawmakers pretend is the problem behind mass shootings. 14 House Republicans managed to vote for this. The mildest gun safety bill you can imagine. Only 14 found the spine, several of whom are not any longer in Congress. That bill was so hard for Republicans, to vote for, made significant changes to the process that someone who is 18 to 21 goes through to buy a firearm. You would think if the people are not allowed to drink in some states, why are they allowed to buy an assault weapon without training even? I think that's absolutely crazy. I've anchored for the military, and I did separately worked on a documentary where we covered training at an army base for war, basically, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so the army base, they set up all these, like fake sand dunes and kind of structures meant to be the kind of structures that would be seen in Afghanistan, Iraq. And so they have the Black Hawk helicopters there, and they train soldiers when to shoot, when not to shoot. It's so in depth, the training is so in depth. It was really impressive. I don't even like guns. It's, that this is not my thing, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because anyone who thinks children or any person needs an assault weapon, they can never justify to me when I ask them, why is it that the army, the military, goes through such training? Why do police officers go through such training and still get it wrong? because in an act of confrontation and in the act of war, so many different variables are flying at you at one time that people make mistakes. That's why the training cannot prevent mistakes from happening. It's meant to mitigate them. We don't even ask people to do any kind of training here for guns. They want an assault weapon, they can have it. This bill gave Democrats a couple of things they really wanted. One of them was closing what is called the boyfriend loophole, which is a loophole in the domestic violence law that didn't include intimate partners who didn't live together or share children, and they weren't married. So, that was a pretty big deal because the United States, where we allow anyone to get a gun, has what Everytown calls a uniquely lethal intimate partner violence problem. They say intimate partner violence and gun violence in the United States are inextricably linked, impacting millions of women, families, and communities across the country. Abusers with firearms are 5 times more likely to kill their female victims, and guns further exacerbate the power and control dynamic that is commonly used by abusers to inflict emotional abuse and exert coercive control over their victims. The statistics on the prevalence of intimate partner violence with a gun in the United States are staggering. Every month, an average of 70 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner. And beyond the daily toll of this problem, in more than half of the mass shootings over the past decade, the perpetrator shot a current or former intimate partner or family member as part of their rampage. The ripple effects of firearms in the hands of abusers extend far beyond the intimate relationship, affecting children who witness or live with it, and the family members, co-workers, and law enforcement officers who respond to it. That's the end of the quote from Everytown. But guess what? The right to life is not as important as the right to own a gun, according to a Trump judge. In February of 2023, following the Supreme Court's expansion of gun rights in 2022, a U.S. court, that is the Fifth Circuit Court, Judge Corey Wilson, whom you have probably heard of before, a Republican judge appointed by that stellar font of moral authority and deep care and respect for women and children that is then President Donald Trump, determined that actually abusers have more rights to own a gun than their victims do to live. So, a Texas man who had been subject to a protection order that banned him from owning a gun, harassing, or threatening his ex-girlfriend and their child, had his conviction for being found with guns overturned as the court struck down a 30-year law that barred people under domestic violence restraining orders from owning a gun. The BBC reported the ban as it applies in this case, Mr. Wilson said, was something that our ancestors would never have accepted. Yes, indeed, we must go back to our ancestors who did not have access to these kind of weapons. Anything that they wouldn't have deemed acceptable, we can't have. We can't have laws if they wouldn't have deemed it acceptable. That, we're going to go way back. I think these people should just be operating underneath the caveman, knuckle dragon on the floor logo, because that's what they want to take us all back to. Yeah. What is this? I'm calling this, stolen justice. If we can have stolen valor, which we see rampant as well right now, then this should be called stolen justice. That court, the one that I just mentioned to you, is also the place where conservatives have, quote, built a pipeline through the Fifth Circuit to ensure they receive whatever political result they want. This is according to Democracy Docket, who also observed that with no small amount of panic, that conservatives have, quote, seized control of the U.S. Supreme Court. I think you already know that, but it's just to paint the bigger picture of they got the Supreme Court, right? And we've just gotten more reporting about just how much dark money is involved and what's going on in the Supreme Court through Ginny Thomas. And now, to paint that whole picture, to put it into perspective, we see that it's not just the Supreme Court, they're basically judge shopping, and they're funneling things through this Trump appointee, the Fifth Circuit. The grim, tragic, obscene reality of the pro-life movement is backed by dark, evil corporate greed, including the Russian asset acting, tax-exempt National Rifle Association, which provided Russian officials access to political organizations in the run-up to the 2016 election. They have had such incredible influence over Republican lawmakers. They've been able to stop any kind of major gun reform in this country for well over a decade. A Democrat-led report indicated that the top NRA officials were aware of Russian agents and former Russian government officials' links with the Kremlin, even as they sought to work more closely together under the banner of gun rights. Perhaps this is a good time to remind Republicans that Putin is engaging in genocide and has an expansionist agenda that they threaten will not stop at Ukraine. So any organization involved in pushing his agenda here in the U.S. is associated with those evil acts against humanity. And yes, the gunning down of children at their school qualifies as an evil act of humanity. It's almost as if there's some agenda to destroy Western freedom through stochastic terrorism while enabling random acts of terror. Children are being slaughtered in schools due to the moral depravity of lawmakers who are being gerrymandered into untouchable positions and can be bought off to look the other way as school shootings become so commonplace that students who survived the Oxford, Michigan school shooting and Newtown, Connecticut school shootings experienced a repeat during the Michigan State school mass shooting in February of this year that killed 3 students and wounded 5 others. You know, I think there's going to be objection. Were they bought off? You can't prove they're bought off. If they weren't bought off, then they have no soul. There's no other way to explain this behavior. Maybe they were threatened, but nothing explains this behavior except some kind of influence over their actions. Unless they just don't care about children. You know, come out and say it. Come out and tell us you don't care. For our children, and for our own souls, our own morality, we have to work together at the local level. That's the only option we have left to us. Work together at the local level, insist on fair maps, judges who are accountable to justice rather than anyone's partisan agenda, left or right, and lawmakers who are responsive to the people. This is it. We do have this power at this local level. Michigan showed us that. They worked first to address the gerrymandering after, decades of control by Republicans. And what did they do as soon as they got Democrats to have a very slim majority, finally, for the first time? They passed gun laws. So it can happen. We can have this basic respect for life. Unfortunately, it's partisan. We're only going to get this from Democrats. And so people need to work at the local level to organize, to make sure that if the voters want gun laws passed, they can get them. This is Sarah Jones on the Politicus Pod for Politicus USA's The Daily. And I want to tell you, if you are tired of billionaires controlling the news you see and this kind of catering to the 1% and elites with both sides of faux objectivity, please consider subscribing to our Substack, supporting independent news that puts the people first. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you next time, and hopefully with better news.